This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, it's Friday, and that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. In today's video, I'm going to be looking at legendary enchantments. We've seen a lot of legendary enchantments printed over the last few years, but legendary enchantments have not been common through most of the game's history. We saw them for the first time back in Kamigawa block, a block with a Legendary Matters theme, the last set of which was printed back in 2005. But in 2013, we took our first trip to Theros, a plane with an Enchantment Matters theme, and we've seen several legendary enchantments on both of our trips to Theros. Ever since that first Theros set, we have seen legendary enchantments somewhat regularly appearing in sets like Oath of the Gatewatch, Ixalan Block, Dominaria, and of course Core Set 2021. In all, there are 78 legendary enchantments, and in this video we're going to talk about the 10 that have made the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A Pro Tour, Players Tour, Mythic Championship, or Legacy or Vintage Championship top 8 is worth 2 points, and a Grand Prix top 8 or a Magic Fest top 8 is worth 1 point. At number 10, we have a legendary enchantment god from the plane of Theros, KERANOS, God of Storms. Theros is a plane inspired by Greek mythology, and it's populated with several super powerful gods who are all legendary enchantment creatures, like KERANOS here. They all ask for your devotion to reach a certain point before they become big ol' creatures with indestructible, but most of them have powerful abilities that can be used even before they become creatures, and really, compared to some of the other gods, KERANOS is kind of inefficient in terms of his stats. A 5-mana 6/5 with indestructible isn't that impressive, but KERANOS makes up for that with a hugely powerful ability. Every turn, KERANOS is going to give you a full card worth of value, either by drawing you a land or lightning bolting something. That is some pretty impressive power. It saw some play in Jeskai Tempo decks in Standard, and in Modern, it used to be a frequent sideboard card for Splinter Twin decks. Sometimes, Twin decks had to side into being more traditional control decks, and side in a win condition that wasn't the Twin combo, and when they did, KERANOS did a pretty good job for them. Twin got banned, of course, in 2015, and since then, KERANOS hasn't managed any points in any format. At number 9, it is Legion's Landing, a double-face card that starts out as a legendary enchantment that gives you a 1/1 vampire with lifelink. Then, as soon as you attack with 3 creatures, it transforms into the powerful land ADANTO, the first fort, which has a great activated ability that lets you churn out 1/1 tokens. The great thing about that is, it gives more aggressive decks something to do with their mana if the game goes long, and make sure that you can always add something to the board. More aggressive decks can also usually transform the landing without a whole lot of effort. Legion's Landing gained all of its points in Standard in various aggro decks, for example, White Weenie, Boros aggro, Selesnya aggro, and Orzhov aggro. At number 8, it is Oath of Chandra. So there's a whole super cycle of oaths, all of which are legendary enchantments which have some sort of enter the battlefield ability and then a static ability that relates to planeswalkers. Flavor-wise, these represent the moment that various planeswalkers throughout the multiverse joined the Gatewatch. Chandra's Oath is nice because even if your deck has 0 planeswalkers, it is a reasonably efficient removal spell. Doing 3 damage to a creature for 2 mana is a good enough rate to see play in most standard formats. Then, this Oath's static ability lets every planeswalker you play shock your opponent at the end of your turn, which is some very nice incidental damage, especially when attached to something as reasonable as a removal spell. As you might expect, the Oath was played mostly in decks that had a few planeswalkers, and the Standard of the time had one hugely powerful and aggressive planeswalker in Gideon, ally of Zendikar. This Oath was played alongside Gideon and other planeswalkers in various Mardu decks, including Vehicles, Ballista, and straight-up aggro. It hasn't gained any points since rotating out of Standard, but it is being played in some Pioneer decks, like Gruul aggro, and if an aggressive red deck that plays a few planeswalkers ever really emerges in the format, it would not be a surprise for the Oath to start gaining some points. At number 7, it is BIDENT of THASSA. So, in addition to Theros gods that all appear as legendary enchantment creatures, the monocolored Theros gods also all have a weapon that is a legendary artifact enchantment, and BIDENT of THASSA is, well, THASSA's weapon in that cycle. The BIDENT is very strong because it allows you to draw a card every time one of your creatures does combat damage to a player, and note by the way that it counts every creature that hits your opponent. On some similar cards, it says something like, whenever one or more of your creatures does combat damage to your opponent, which means you only draw a single card no matter how many of your creatures hit your opponent, but that's not true with the BIDENT. It also has an activated ability that combines well with the static ability, since it can force opposing creatures to attack you, opening up your opponent to take several hits, while you draw several cards. The BIDENT tends to really snowball because as you draw more cards, you draw more creatures, and they draw you even more cards, so it doesn't take long for your opponent to be completely overwhelmed. This can be especially powerful against control opponents because they can't usually handle the opposing player drawing as many cards as they are. The BIDENT was pretty much only played in one deck while it was in Standard, Devotion to Blue, which was largely a mono-blue aggro deck with lots of cheap, evasive creatures, exactly what you want to take advantage of the BIDENT. At number 7, we saw her BIDENT, and at number 6, we have THASSA, God of the Sea. If your devotion is high enough, THASSA becomes a 3-mana 5/5 indestructible creature, which isn't too shabby, and, like all the gods, she can do some stuff until you reach that point. In her case, she lets you scry every turn, which improves the quality of your draws, while also improving your chances of getting your devotion high enough so that THASSA can rumble. She can also make your creatures unblockable. Once THASSA becomes a creature, she can target herself with the ability, and becoming a huge unblockable creature who can't be dealt with in very many ways is pretty awesome. THASSA was a key card in Standard Devotion to Blue decks, which were well positioned to make THASSA into a creature very early on in the game. Devotion to Blue was one of the best decks in all of Theros Standard, so she found considerable success just in that one deck, alongside her BIDENT. In December of 2019, THASSA also gained her first points outside of Standard, after appearing in a Legacy Merfolk deck that top-8'd a Legacy Championship event. This could be a sign of more points to come for THASSA. At number 5, we have our third and final Theros god to make the list, EREBOS, God of the Dead. EREBOS gives you a huge body for the amount of mana you spend and can draw you a bunch of cards, and that's a pretty great deal. Like with THASSA, extra cards also means you're more likely to get EREBOS online as a creature. It doesn't hurt that he doesn't let your opponent gain life either. While there were lots of devotion decks in Theros Standard, Black was arguably the most powerful of the bunch, thanks to cards like EREBOS and Grey Merchant of Asphodel, which hugely incentivized you playing cards with lots of black mana symbols. EREBOS was also played in some less devotion-centric control decks while it was in Standard. He doesn't have any points since rotating out of Standard, though. At number 4, it is Oath of NISSA, the second and final oath to make the list. Like Oath of Chandra and all the other oaths, Oath of NISSA does something when it enters and then gives you a Planeswalker-related effect. In the case of Oath of NISSA, you get some pretty nice card selection, and getting that on turn 1 is usually pretty great. NISSA's oath also makes it easier to cast your Planeswalkers. Oath of NISSA has gained most of its points in Standard, frequently in decks that can take advantage of both of the oath's effects. In other words, she's been played in decks that have multiple Planeswalkers, usually of at least 2 different colors. In those decks, she is giving you card selection that you want, while also making it less challenging to cast Planeswalkers. When it was first printed, its primary home was in Selesnya token decks, which ran several Planeswalkers who could produce tokens. Later on, it was played in copycat combo decks, which were generally 4-color decks looking to combo off using Saheeli Rai. Oath of NISSA helped that deck more consistently cast her on turn 3, which was pretty critical for the deck. In Modern, it's been played in Valakut and Toolbox decks, both of which the Oath can help you dig for. It doesn't have any points in any format since 2017. It would have likely gained some points in Pioneer, but it ended up getting banned out of the format in November of 2019, about a month after the format was created. It was again being utilized in copycat decks where it really made the combo too easy to pull off. And while Felidar Guardian got banned in Pioneer 2, the Oath was also making other decks too good, like Mono Green Devotion Ramp. The Oath will likely be banned in Pioneer going forward, so it will probably continue to be idle with 45 points. At number 3, it is our second and final god weapon from Theros, the Whip of EREBOS. It's kind of interesting that the only 2 weapons from that cycle to make the list were the weapons of the only 2 mono-colored gods who made the list. Anyway, the Whip actually has the same number of points as our number 4 card, Oath of NISSA, but I put it ahead of it on the list because it has more Pro Tour top 8s. The Whip gives your whole board lifelink, which is a nice effect, though certainly not one you are really excited about on a 4-mana enchantment. The Whip's real power comes from its ability to reanimate creatures, and while it can only do it for a single turn, there were enough creatures in Standard who the Whip could really take advantage of. Chief among them were Hornet Queen and Grey Merchant of Asphodel. The Merchant's Enter the Battlefield ability would do a ton of damage, even if he had to be sacrificed at the end of the turn, and the Queen would leave behind her insect tokens. The whip was played at first in devotion-centric decks that focused more on the Grey Merchant plan, but it eventually transitioned into Sultai whip decks, which were more interested in the Hornet Queen plan. The whip has gained all of its points so far in Standard. At number 2, it is ARGUEL'S Bloodfast, which also has the same number of points as both Whip of Erebos and Oath of Nissa, but it has more Pro Tour top 8s than either of them, so I gave it the edge. Bloodfast is from the same cycle as Legion's Landing. It starts out as a legendary enchantment. In this case, it lets you pay life and mana to draw cards, and it transforms into a legendary land when a certain condition is met. In this case, once your life total drops enough, either from drawing a bunch of cards or being beaten down by your opponent, it transforms into Temple of ACLAZOTZ, a land that can tap for black mana, and it can also sacrifice creatures and gain you back some life, something you might really be in need of after fasting for too long. The two sides synergize together pretty well, as you can be pretty reckless with the fast when you know you'll be getting back some of that life later after it transforms. During its time in Standard, the fast was played primarily in aggro decks. One of the biggest problems for aggro decks can be running out of gas against an opponent who makes a game go long. As a result, lots of aggro decks in Standard ran Bloodfast in the sideboard as it gave them a way to make sure they could keep pressuring their opponent thanks to the extra cards. The fast also has a single Pro Tour top 8 in Pioneer, where it was played in a Dimir Inverter deck. It is likely to continue to gain points going forward. And at number 1, it is Search for AZCANTA, another card from the double-faced legendary enchantment cycle from Ixalan. As Search for AZCANTA, it lets you choose every upkeep whether to put the top card of your library into your graveyard. This gives you card selection and a way to load up your graveyard with stuff you want in your graveyard. Then, once you have 7 cards in your graveyard, Search transforms into AZCANTA, the Sunken Ruin, a powerful legendary land that can tap for blue mana, and it provides you with a powerful card draw effect, letting you pay 3 mana to put the best non-creature, non-land card from the top 4 cards of your library into your hand. It's primarily been played in control decks, which makes sense, as those decks run very few creatures and are basically guaranteed to hit a card every time they activate it. In Standard, it was played in Jeskai, Esper, and Blue-Black control, as well as Simic Nexus and Izzet Drakes. It has also been played in a variety of control decks in Modern, with Blue-White control and Jeskai control the most frequent places it's been played as of late. It has also found some success in Legacy Miracles decks. These decks are the best at getting value out of the Search part of the card, because they seek to cast cards for their miracle cost, and Search lets you manipulate the top of your library enough to increase the chances of that happening. Search doesn't have any points in Pioneer yet. It was being played pretty heavily in Nexus Fog decks, but Nexus of Fate got banned out of the format in 2019 before the Search could gain any points there. But given the fact that it already has multi-format success, it could certainly find a new home in Pioneer going forward, and it's also likely to continue to amass points in Modern and Legacy, so its hold on number 1 on this list could be pretty secure. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you need to catch up on the almost 300 other MTG Top 10s I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.